26 books and 7,768 pages read. That is too much to hold, so you're not getting the stack this time. But that was what I managed to read in June. No, I don't know how. This is officially the best reading month page-wise that I've ever had. I read more books in March, but less pages. This is ridiculous. I'm gonna have timestamps down below for this video. I think it's gonna be a very, very long one. Usually I don't put the book titles in the timestamps because engagement. But this time, there's 26 books, so as and when I can, because some of the titles are long, like I'll shorten them as needed, I will just have the titles of each book for each timestamp section, so you can go check that out. You can skip to the exact books that you want to see my opinions on, because this is a long one. So like I said, 26 books were read, 13 of them I already owned, so a fair few of them were new into my life in 2024. And I got through some of those books with 99 hours of audiobooking. My average rating ended up being a 3.8 star, so not too bad. And my biggest book was the Mime Order with 535 pages, and my oldest book was Kim by Rudyard Kipling, which was first published in 1901. Then we have my other stats. These may take a bit of time. Format: paperbacks 7, hardbacks 8, audiobooks 8, 1 mixed between audio and physically reading, 1 comic and 1 ebook. So that's not too bad. It's the nationalities and the genres where we start getting into things a little bit. So we'll go with nationality first. So we have 1 Irish author, 5 American authors, 10 English authors, 1 Danish, 1 Indian, 1 Angolan, 1 Dutch, 1 Japanese, 1 Australian, 1 Swedish, 1 Argentinian, 1 Irish/English. Her parents are Irish and she was born in England and she lives in Ireland now. She's getting both. And 1 book by multiple authors. And then the genres. We have 2 science fiction, 3 contemporary, 7 fantasy, 5 non-fiction, 1 memoir, 2 classics, 1 horror, 1 mythology, 1 crime, 1 historical, and 1 mystery. Like I said, it was a lot of books. How dare you? Free Palestine. Now I have listed them all. Let's actually go through them. I have my ratings here in my bullet journal. This is what I've been using to read from, because I'm not going to remember all of these stats. So I will be looking down at this to take the ratings for them and make sure I'm reading them in the right order. But yeah, Jesus Christ, what a month. First up we have And Another Thing by Eoin Colfer, which is the 6th and final book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy written by Douglas Adams. Yes, I know that makes no sense. It does. This was really fun to read. This was written a lot more in the modern day. It was in the 2000s. 2009 is when it was first published. So this is a lot more modern than the other books, and that is something that I had struggled with, was the socially normal for the time period depictions of people and relationships and women. So this was improved just from the fact that I got to write this at a later time period and experience that change. Also, I really like Eoin Colfer's writing. I've read the Art Was Foul series and had a lot of fun with it, so it was really interesting to read something adult from him and seeing characters that Douglas Adams had originally written and seeing how Eoin interpreted them. So I ended up giving this a 3.5. It was a really good read. I had a good time with it. Then next up with a 4.5, and that is Further Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin, the 3rd book in the series. I'm having such a good time with this series. I went in expecting like straight contemporary, like just people's lives, although it's not actually, I guess it's historical fiction, because it was like written in one time and set in a time earlier, and now I'm reading it. Anyway, I was expecting contemporary vibes from this. Every book has a mystery in. I don't know how I didn't figure that out. They were also mystery books, like crime books. So I am having a fantastic time with these incredibly gay crime books. Like, so yeah, I'm loving this series so much. It was gifted to me by my wonderful uncle who runs a fantastic page called On This Gay Day, which has gay facts from every single day throughout history. Of course he gifted me this series, the entire series. I love my uncle so much. And yeah, I'm having a great time with them. Honestly, I read Tales of the City and was like, okay, that was pretty decent. I wasn't expecting to enjoy that. And then he gifted me the rest. I was like, well, of course I have to read them. And I'm having a fantastic time with them. Like, it's turning out very well. So this was another great one. Then an audiobook, and that is Lords and Ladies by Terry Pratchett. So my partner doesn't seem to have the Witches books, or many of them at least. So I had to audiobook this one. I'm not mad. I love the Witches by audio. They're so much fun. This was another 4.5-star read. I had a great time. We follow, of course, Nanny Ogg and Granny Weatherwax. Have I gotten that the wrong way around? Nanny Weatherwax, Granny Ogg, Nanny Ogg and Granny Weatherwax and Margaret. And Margaret is marrying a king and nothing is going to plan. Everything's going wrong. And it's just so much fun, and as always Pratchett has these fantastic insights into culture and reality and talking over things. Fantastic, and just, oh, it's so fun, so enjoyable. I love it, I love it. And then I also read Theatre of Cruelty, which is book like 14.5. It's like 3-4 pages long, but I had a good time with it. It is like Punch and Judy in the Discworld, so very British and a fun little read. And that one was just 3 stars. Another 3 stars, and that is Neuer Schwung by Miel Millikamps, Tiefenkig, Vandia and you. This book is in German. I've had it for years. I got it when I was about 16. I went to some sort of EU thing. Morns in British. And it's all about like the facilities that the European Union can offer people, and I was learning German at the time in school, and so I got the book in German. So it is fairly basic German, but it does have some odd, like, governmental words in it. Like, and especially because it's German, it's all just one long word, but you know, like, oh, you can apply for the funding for this specific thing you're doing. It's just one long word. So it is a bit of a weird book, very policy heavy, and I'm glad I finally read it, and I am glad that I picked it up, but I don't think this is one for most people. Then 4 stars for my memoir of the month, and that is One by Peter Schmeichel. So I actually listened to this one primarily via audiobook. It's not read by Schmeichel, but I still think it did a really good job, and I found this so interesting, but most people won't. You need to care about football or Manchester United to care about this book. So that's most of you. Skip to the next one right away. However, I am a Man United fan from my dad, and I enjoy football, and Schmeichel played for United, so I was interested. Of course, he played for many other teams, so it also follows his time in Portugal, his time in Denmark, it follows his time at different clubs in the UK, so it's not just Man U. If you follow Schmeichel from anywhere else, you will also enjoy this. But it was really interesting to kind of get a glimpse into his life, how he ended up at the point he was, his kind of mental thoughts around that time, and like going deep into a lot of really important now, like Man U matches, ones that are iconic now, 30 years later. So I found that really interesting, and also seeing a little bit of him with, I was just going to go with Schmeichel, with Kasper Schmeichel, who is a fantastic goalkeeper in his own right now for the Danish team, and seeing a little bit of kind of how he is still in football, partly because of Kasper and partly just as a pundit, as an ex-footballer on his own. So yeah, I found this very interesting. I had a fantastic time reading it. I watched so many old Man U games that were put up like on YouTube and stuff, some of them on the official Man U page, because he mentions so many stats and so many specific moments from games, and so I'm like, I need to find this one specific save or this one specific kick that Eric Cantona did and stuff like that. So I watched so much football because of him. So yeah, I had a great time with that one. And then 5 stars. The Mime Order, the author's preferred text by Samantha Shannon. So I, unfortunately for me, have the broken binding editions of this series. I love them. They're gorgeous. Why will they not tell us when they're releasing? They have already told us the designs of them. I have feelings about that. However, this is about the book itself. It's so good, it's so good. The Mime Order was not my favourite when I first read it, back in 2019, I want to say. I was reading it on a train from Newcastle to Portsmouth and read almost all of it on the train, and then had to unfortunately disembark from the train and read some of it in my halls. But I read it then, and I remember still giving it 5 stars just because I was enamoured with the Bun Season series, but realistically, like, now I don't do that as much. I'm a bit more realistic with my star rating, and it would have been a 3.5 or a 4 at the time. I don't know why, I just didn't vibe with it. It was a really long book, it was really dense, and I don't know how much of that is my change as a reader, how much of that is me knowing more about the series, and how much of that is the rewrite done by Shannon. But this was a 5-star read. This is perfection. This is done so well. This is a fantastic expansion of Paige Mahoney's world, and I'm so excited to read the next books. Then, a solid 4-star read, we have Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I've had this on my TBR forever, and I'm so glad to finally get to it. I think it was gifted to me by Carrie. Yes, it was. Thank you so much, Carrie. And this is written by an Indigenous author, and it is a high fantasy world. I did not expect any of this. We have pirates and mermaids and cults. I don't know what I was expecting going in, but I wasn't expecting that. We have a lot of like seafaring travel and backstabbing and miscommunication in politics, and it's just done so well. I had a fantastic time with it. Really blew me out the water because for some reason I wasn't expecting that. I don't even know. I don't know what I was expecting from it. Everyone said it was good, so I picked it up. So yeah, I definitely need to carry on with this trilogy. I think the 3rd book is just coming out this year. Obviously I won't be getting the hardback for that because I would like them to match and be pretty, but I do need to grab the paperbacks. Then an unexpected 4.5-star read, and that is Greenbanks by Dorothy Whipple. I picked this up purely because it was a Persephone Books published book. They publish undersung female classic authors, and that's literally all I knew about this going in, because it doesn't have any sort of synopsis. It's just got like quotes on the bookmark that comes with it and on the dust jacket. So I knew nothing. This is like such a bold claim, but it's very Jane Austen-esque in that nothing is really happening. Essentially, you are following 2 women in this book. You are following a grandmother and her granddaughter. They are in an upper middle class family, and you're seeing how things aren't as perfect as they portray to the public, and how members of the family and close friends of the family's lives are tumultuous and impacted by everything going on around them, and just aren't as smooth sailing as you would expect. And it's just written so beautifully. Like, it's not even the same writing style as Jane Austen. It's a very different writing style, but it evokes the same things for me personally, of just deeply enjoying learning more about these people and just about their day-to-day lives, and just I don't really know how else to describe it. I understand why there isn't really much of a synopsis, but of course the grandmother, she loses some of her children. This is written and set in like from the 1920s to the 1950s, so I think roughly. So of course the World War happens, and there are some young men that go off and they don't come back, or don't come back the same, but then you also are primarily following the women at home and seeing how they respond to everything that's going on and growing up in this environment and in this changing landscape. And it is just absolutely stunning. It's brilliant. I am so glad that Persephone Books has been able to reintroduce people to Dorothy Whipple. I will 100% be reading her other works. They are all published by Persephone Books. Potentially some other people will like indie publish them on Amazon and stuff, but I want to get Persephone ones because they have some really interesting well, it's like an introduction in other classics, but they put it at the back, which is really helpful. So it's an afterword instead, so you don't get spoiled. And yeah, they have really interesting afterwords in the back of people who have clearly studied the text. And yeah, that's really appreciated. So this was a fantastic read. One that was less than fantastic. This is a weird one. It's a really weird one. So thank you very much. I was gifted this by the wonderful folks over at Tor Pan Macmillan as part of the blog tour. Thank you very much, folks. I really appreciate it. I had a very mixed time with this book. It took until approximately 150 pages in for me to stop wanting to tear limb from the main character. He is the most frustrating point of view I have ever read from in my entire motherfucking life. Oh, I wanted to slap him and then shove a sock in his mouth and then hit him over the head with another sock filled with butter.
Once again, I offer the butter sock.
Oh, no. I would have DNF'd this, truthfully, because I hit the 100-page mark. I was still infuriated. I am a very nosy person, so I was still curious about the actual pirate plot in here. This is a pirate book. It's a pirate fantasy, okay? And I was still curious about the pirate plot. But if I hadn't have been gifted the book, I would have DNF'd it at 100 pages, because I could not deal with his consistent dumb jokes. They're all like sexual innuendo jokes. I'm like, yeah, fine, that's fine, whatever. Like, my group of friends does that ridiculously. But they're all bad. And he's apparently what is called a soft boy. Thank you, Hannah from Letter M, for introducing me to that term. And he's just pathetic. His whole thing is being pathetic, and that's how he tries to get his cock wet. And I don't understand it. Anyway, despite that, I ended up enjoying this book. I refused to give it any higher than a 3-star rating, just because of the beginning. What did I actually end up giving it? I think I did just put down 3. The ending of this is a solid 4. Like, I had a great time, and that's why I ended up giving it a 3 overall. The beginning was a 1, and then the end was a 4. So I had a very mixed time with this book, but part of it is because eventually when the plot really gets going, once you're into the book, our lovely main character, Ivra, he doesn't have as much time available on the page or in his life to be such a fucking annoying nuisance because shit's happening. And so we don't get as much of him being a pain in the ass, so that is a massive improvement. Also, the LGBTQ plus representation in here is done fantastically. I really enjoyed that, and the pirate story was really fun. Like, if they write another book, I will make friends read it so they can tell me in advance and see if he's as annoying as he is in the first 100 pages, because if he isn't, I'd be happy to read more. By the end, the found family was really cute, I was enjoying the story, but dear god, those first 150 pages were like pulling out my own toenails, millimetre by millimetre. It's a skill, Alexandra Rowland. I hope she never sees my review, because it's a really mean one, but like, I don't understand. I do not understand. But yes, so if you're not keen on like consistent, intense sexual innuendo, don't pick this up at all. If you can deal with the soft boy annoyance of him like pathetically, like literally rolling over and begging, then like I can't recommend it because of the first 150 pages, but I loved the ending, and the pirate story is so cool. There's like glow-in-the-dark dogs and like sea serpents that they are defeating, and like the captain is like getting their legacy, and it's a whole thing. And it becomes really good, and just the beginning was awful. So bad. On a much better note, and also mentioning Hannah from Letter M because she gifted this one to me, and that is The Patriarchs by Angela Saini, How Men Came to Rule. This is a non-fiction with heavy research done by Saini, all into how patriarchy came to be the predominant mode of society across the planet. This is not man-hating. Genuinely, this is not man-hating. In fact, a lot of the patriarchy is actually negative towards men, and she mentions this, but also it is just factual what she's stating. Yes, there is stuff that is very bad for women in patriarchies. She does mention this because that is a fact, but it's not trying to man-hate, it is just explaining how it looks like from the historical evidence that these were created, and how the few matriarchies that we do have were then dismantled by other colonial patriarchies, and it's just a fascinating insight into all of that. It's done beautifully well. Like I said, I am a fairly strong feminist, so I was fine to go into this and get man-hating. I was kind of looking forward to having some man-hating. There is none. Which, it's still a fantastic book, like, that doesn't detract from it in any way, but there isn't any. This is just really well written, really well researched, really unbiased, done brilliantly. This is the second book I've read from Angela Saini. They are an Indian author. The first book I read was called Superior, and it was a book all about race science, and that was done fantastically. She is a brilliant non-fiction author who does amazing research on various different intersectionalities that, at least as far as I know, she currently deals with. I can't wait to read more from her. Woman and Power by Mary Beard is one I listened to by audiobook. It's a very short one, and it's very, very good. It is all about her experience, experiencing sexism, both coming across it in her research and also experiencing it firsthand as a woman. If you don't know, Mary Beard is the most prominent ancient Roman and ancient Greek author. She writes non-fictions about the time period that are very readable, very well written, and very well researched. She is the name in this space, along with Tom Holland. No, not that one. And of course, being a woman in this space that is very male-centric, she gets a lot of sexist, misogynistic hate. She will receive tweets with ridiculous things, but then also on top of that, when she's doing her research, the women who were living in ancient Greece and ancient Rome were not very powerful and were quite prejudiced against it. It was a very heavily patriarchal society. And so she sees this in her research, she experiences this going to archaeological digs, going to present her research, just being and existing as a woman online. And it's fascinating to hear her talk about this in a way that is very close to her and her own self. It's brilliantly written, fantastically done, can't recommend it enough. That was, of course, another 4.5 star read. Then 4 stars for this creepy motherfucker, which is Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. Apologies, she's Argentinian and I don't have any knowledge of Spanish, so I probably just Italianised that a bit. I do apologise. This is dystopian horror. There's an illness that's went round and the government states that every animal has it and is unsafe to eat, unsafe to live with. Animals must go. And so everything apart from birds, because they couldn't kill the birds, they are still scared of them, is gone. They kill them, there's some in the wild, but like there's no pets, everyone had to kill their dogs, but they also had to kill the cattle. So no one was eating meat, everyone was forced into a vegan diet for a certain time period. And then they started using humans instead. Lower class humans, ones who were already, for example, in the slave trade, etc. And this becomes a big thing, and of course they end up breeding the humans, and so it's then those humans that are used as meat, and they are led through like cattle, they are stunned, they are dismembered the same way that we do to cattle. And whilst there is an aspect of this book that does then, of course, just by the nature of it, make you think of how we consume meat and about the pros and cons of veganism and vegetarianism, that's not, at least for me, what I took as the main point of the book. I am still a meat eater after reading this. I do wish that I was able to reliably source meat that is humanely cared for. That is very difficult to do right now in the UK. But the thing that I really thought the most about with this one was hypocrisy. So our main character in here hates what he does. He works in a slaughterhouse because his family already owned one pre-transition to humans, and it pays very well to work with the humans now, and his father is in a care home with Alzheimer's, and paying for that care is very expensive, first-hand experience, but also the more you pay, the better care you get. And he wants to give his dad the best care possible, and so he stays in this job. That's despite the fact that he hates this going on and he actually doesn't eat meat himself anymore. And there are more hypocrisies than just that. That's the introductory one. And of course that one is one that a lot of us can understand. Capitalism does make a lot of us do jobs or various different things that we don't actually agree with or align with, but we need to pay rent and buy food. But it goes further, and as we go on in the book we see him getting more and more frustrated with this human meat industry, but we also see him justifying his own personal actions. So he actually, just check the synopsis and it does mention this, he's gifted a specimen, and it's a female specimen, and he at first is like repulsed that he's been given this not quite human thing to care for. You can kind of guess where it goes, but then the ending of that is such a the ending is such a twist for like how he uses this woman who has no speech, because also the humans who are used for the meat have their tongues cut out so that they can't try and learn speech, regardless of the intelligence that is there, which is not nurtured or encouraged, obviously. It's a really uncomfortable book. It really makes you think on a lot of different topics, on bodily autonomy, on hypocrisy, on living in a capitalist society, on eating meat, on the way that we structure. Very deep thoughts. 4 stars. Okay, we're about halfway through now. My back hurts. So, next up is Norse Gods by Johan Egerkrans. This one is translated from Swedish, and we actually bought this when we were in Stockholm last year, not this year. And it is what it says on the tin. It is a non-fiction, kind of, about the Norse gods. We picked this up because we saw Johan's artwork in the Viking Museum in Stockholm, in the Djurgården, and we adored it, me and my partner. We think his art style is absolutely stunning. And so when we saw that he had a book that was filled with this art style, like, we needed it. And as someone who doesn't really know too much about the Norse Gods, I loved this so much. It's so well written, so educational in kind of telling you the very base stories with these gorgeous illustrations, and this was fantastic. This is beautiful, and I am slightly, it wasn't cheap, but I am also slightly upset that we didn't get any of his other books when we were out there. It's a lot easier to get them even in English in Sweden. And he's got books about dragons and different things, and they must be so well done, and yeah, we really like his art style, so this was fantastic. Then another audiobook, and that is A General Theory of Oblivion, and I cannot remember the author's name, that's so bad. I also can't pronounce the author's name. So this is the Angolan author. He is white, and he comes from Portuguese settlers who settled into Angola, and this is all about the decolonialisation of Angola from Portugal. It follows the violence that happened and the mistrust and how general civilians try to survive through it, and we are primarily following a woman who, she is severely agoraphobic, and we learn why at the end of the book, and it's very sad. And so she doesn't want to leave the house anyway, and then all of this violence is kicking off with the decolonialisation, and so she, terrified, walls herself into her flat. She's at one of the higher floors of her flat. She's at the end area, and for some reason they were doing some renovations, and so they've got like cement around, and so she just cements herself up and ends the corridor, and people just don't realise, and so she's cemented into this room. Even though it's a flat, it does have a garden on the balcony, so she's able to grow food to a certain extent, and she of course eats through slowly and methodically the stuff in the cupboards. She is in that flat for about 30 years, just surviving as best she can. At one point she is using these diamonds that her sister had, because she was living with her sister and her husband, her sister's husband, but they unfortunately were killed in the violence, and she's using her sister's diamonds to lure in pigeons so that she can kill them for something to eat. And then we also, on top of seeing her survival, we also then see more of what's going on outside within very specific snapshots. We don't get a general overview of the Angolan Revolution, we get very specific snapshots of what certain people are doing within the revolution. And it's just done brilliantly. Like I said, I listened to this via audiobook. I think I listened to it all in one day. And at first I was like, okay, that was an interesting book, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. It is so well written. Of course, there is the fact that it is written by a Portuguese descended Angolan, so not one that is, I guess, natively from Angola. So he is a white man rather than a black man, and so that does obviously have some level of impact. And the woman that we're following is, as well, she is Portuguese. So part of me still does want to read more from Angola, just to get voices. Of course this man is Angolan, but to get voices who are more historically Angolan, same way as like the indigenous folks in North America. But it is a fascinating novel. I think it's really well written, really well depicted. I have never heard anyone talk about it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I need a physical copy of this in my life because it is just fantastic, and it's one of the books that I picked up purely for my read around the world challenge that I'm kind of doing as and when, and I had been able to find an audiobook of it, and I needed a new audiobook, and I'm so glad. This is off to a fantastic start because wow. Then, on a lighter note, I read this comic. It's one of the free comic book day ones. It's just called Star Wars. This was my partner's, and so he was like, oh, do you want to read it? It's actually quite good. And it is. It utilises the characters that we already know, as well as a couple that we don't. I really enjoy the way that they portray Lando, and I hate the fact that at the end, the story is left on a cliffhanger to get you to buy the next volume. And I am a petty motherfucker, so I ain't buying no volume. Very stars. And then another not so great one, annoyingly, that is D, A Tale of Two Worlds by Michel Faber. This, of course, is inspired by A Tale of Two Cities to a certain extent. I haven't read that book by Dickens yet. Me and Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe are actually looking to read that later in 2024. But not read it yet. However, he's also been inspired by many other books, not to his advantage. He's been inspired by Alice in Wonderland, he has been inspired by the Chronicles of Narnia. Those are the two that come off the top of my head, and it's not as good as any of them. So the main character in this book is a young girl from Somaliland, which isn't officially recognised by many nations. I don't know if it's recognised by any of them, but it is a block of land. They have denoted that that is their land, it's separate from Somalia, and they have their own currency, and they've of course had a lot of disruption and war. And so the main character is a young girl, and she was sent to the UK because they can get her away and get her to safety, and so she was adopted in the UK. And then we do find out through the course of the story that her parents have passed away. I don't feel like that's a spoiler because it doesn't really change anything. But yeah, they pass away. But she never knew them. And at the very beginning of the story there is a lot about her trying to connect and connect back. But it's not woven into any of the rest of the story. It's, of course, it's a very important part of her identity, but this is a book written for children, and so that then isn't developed any further than what it really should be. And I feel like with this concept it would have been better. Again, he was inspired by children's books, but it would have, if he's wanting to have this kind of discussion on refugees from somewhere like Somaliland, which doesn't have official recognition but is of course very close to the hearts of people who are from Somaliland, there was too much of a discussion to fit in there. It felt like a very weird thing for this Dutch man, this white Dutch man, who spent most of his life in Australia and in the UK, to include. Like, I'm all here for adding representation into books, but it just wasn't done well, in my opinion. Grain of salt. Now for the rest of the book. Again, what the fuck. Goes through a portal, ends up in a fantasy world. It's Narnia, they have to stop the Endless Winter, so it's the Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe. You meet various different groups along the way, and we get the whole mid-rant. I filled up my memory card, so just went and emptied that, got a coffee, we can go again now. This just isn't great. It's not written as well as the classics that it's attempting to emulate, and it is too close to emulating them. It doesn't feel like an homage, it feels like a copy. And this was one of my around the world books, but then when I found out that Michel Faber spent most of his life in Australia and the UK, this is for the Netherlands, and it doesn't really feel like it, because I was already reading an extra one for that anyway, because I've read Anne Frank's diary and I wasn't sure if that quite counted, but this feels like it counts less than Anne Frank's diary, because she at least spent the majority of her short life in the Netherlands, whereas despite Faber being Dutch, he did not. So this was overall all round a disappointment for me. Yeah, I'm sure that if I'd read this when I was 10 years old, I would have found it fun. But if I had read it at 10 years old, it would not be one of the few children's books that you can't see, but that I do have. I have one shelf of children's books that I read as a child that I've kept. Any children's books that I read now go on the rest of my shelves. But I have one shelf of ones that I read as a kid, and it wouldn't be on there. I wouldn't have kept it. If you want to give it to a child, they'll have a good time. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's fine. There's better fiction out there. And I ended up giving this a 2.5 star rating, which is obviously not fabulous. Then on to a 3.5 star rating, and that is Bullet Train by Kōtarō. This is translated from Japanese, and I didn't realise it is the second book in the series, not the first. Luckily, that isn't too much of an issue for two reasons. One, I own the first book, I can read it. But two, also, apparently all that is like spoiled for me in the first book is that a couple of the side characters in there I know survive because I've seen them in this one, or at least they survive for a bit. I don't know which side characters they are, but apparently that is the main spoiler that I have gotten, is just some side characters I know don't die in the first book. So, I'm still slightly annoyed at myself for reading it in the wrong order, but it doesn't look like it matters as much as many other series can do, so that's a good thing. This one As the title suggests, they are on a Shinkansen, which is one of the super fast bullet trains, as we call them in English, that goes through Japan, and there are a number of assassins on this train. Some of them are there just to transport, some of them are there to specifically take items, some of them are there because they want to kill someone who is on the Shinkansen. And who is going to survive out of all of them, and who is going to die a painful, or not so painful, it depends, death. This was actually so much fun. So I listened to this one primarily via audiobook, although I did take some glances at certain points at the book. For example, at certain points in the book, there's a character called Morning Glory, which is an interesting choice of name. I don't know about it in American English, but in British English, that is a certain event that happens to men when they wake up in the morning with a certain je ne sais quoi. Anyway, yeah, so in the audiobook, that is not the name given to this person. Their name is Japanese, so I will not butcher it because I don't remember it properly. This was a few weeks ago now that I read this, and I've not seen it written down. But yeah, so the name is something Japanese, and so I was like, this isn't matching up with my chapter titles, because the titles are of the names of the people. But yeah, so I figured out they gave him a different name in the audiobook, but other than that, it's all the same. And this is just really, really interesting. It's really fascinating kind of seeing what is actually going to happen, and the kind of, there is a mixture of like a little bit of like normal societal, especially Japanese politeness, mixed in with these assassins that are therefore technically serial killers. One of them is obsessed with Thomas the Tank Engine, which was unexpected, and then unexpectedly cured at one point. This is just, yeah. So it got a 3.5. It's not like my new favourite thriller, but I had a really good time. It was really interesting to kind of explore Japanese thrillers and crimes and mysteries, that whole genre, because I've only read English and American so far, so it was interesting to get more into that. I am actually looking forward to reading the first book and seeing kind of how that one plays out. I am excited for that. So yeah, this was a very interesting one, and this was gifted to me from an unhaul from the lovely Olivia Savannah, so thank you. 4 stars for a tiny short read now, and that is My Own Story by Emmeline Pankhurst. Extracts from. This was sent to me in a gift box that the wonderful Caitlin from Letters from Kinradi got me for, was it for my birthday? Was it for Christmas? Was it just because she loves me? It was one of those 3, or possibly all combined. But yeah, it was like a little feminist gift box, and obviously Emmeline Pankhurst was one of our primary feminists in the UK for suffragettes rights. Now, she is problematic in her own way. She started out being much better than she ended. She went kind of left-wing to right-wing. She used to be a lot more for general workers' rights and never seemed to display any prejudices against the few women of colour that were there. However, that changed by the end of her life, and she was a lot more focused on just the upper class white women. So that is something to be aware. That is a problem across suffrages, across the entirety of the Western world, is that it has not included as much as it should have working class women, but also specifically women of colour. So that is to be known. Don't go into this thinking she's some kind of heroine who's absolutely perfect. She is not, she was not, she never will be. However, just based on this, I wasn't expecting this to be so readable. Like, this is stuff that she's written in her own words, obviously, and obviously this was written a while ago, I think, in the 19-somethings, is it going to tell me? 1914. So given that this is like recollections of her time, she may have written some of this down in the late 1800s. So this is not a modern text, and it very much reads like it. It's very conversational and very easy to read. These are long chapters, it's 3 long chapters in here, and that's it. Obviously it's a short book. The book is 150 pages. But it's like 50-page chapters are not the shortest, but it was so readable. I really recommend. I want to pick up the whole book at some point now, just because it was really easy to read. But it was also fascinating to learn more about specifics. Of course I knew about the suffragettes, I vaguely knew what they did. I knew there was a woman who jumped in front of one of the horses at one of our big horse races. It was the king's horse and she died. I know they were force-fed. And that is a fair amount now that I'm listing it out. But there is more. And even just in this tiny book, I found out more. I found out, of course, when she started, which is one of the chapters included, where she was much more inclusive, especially of working class women, and then also how she consistently and continuously was really strongly feeling about not doing any violence towards people. That was one of their main things. Like, they will smash up, I mean, of course I think they hurt the horse, so I am a bit annoyed about that, but like, they'll smash up buildings, they'll smash up belongings, but they wouldn't hurt people. That was really important to them. And so this was fascinating, in other words. This was absolutely fascinating. I had a wonderful time with it. I'm checking my book. I gave it 4 stars. I'm not surprised. This is a fantastic little book. I really do recommend picking up this little one, if not the whole one, so that you get kind of a little bite-sized taste of it. I'm tempted to get more of these. Vintage Feminism is the section. So Vintage is a publisher. They have a feminism subsect. They also have A Vindication of the Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft, which is Mary Shelley's mother. The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf, which I've heard not so great things about, actually. A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, and The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. So I would like to read more from this little series. Then, The Sirens of Surrentum by Caroline Lawrence. This is one of the books in the Rowan Mysteries series. I have been reading this series since I was a child. I said before about like books from my childhood that end up on that shelf. There is one exception, and that is when I continually read this series and spot it in charity shops. I actually read the paperback editions that look like this, and have somehow ended up in conversation online with Ms. Lawrence, who has told me that they are actually the rarest covers to find. So this is why I've been struggling to find them at all, let alone secondhand. But, of course, this is a hardback. Why did I get it? I haven't got any other hardbacks that I've seen when I've been secondhand shopping. But this one, I put the dust jacket on backwards. Wonderful. This one is signed and personalised to someone called Amy, but I've been called Amy many times in my life, so I will run with it. But yeah, so this series follows 4 young children in ancient Rome, and they are solving mysteries. They're up here. So this one is Flavia, and she is the rich Roman girl, but she's female. Then we have Jonathan, and his father is a doctor, so they're not poor, but he is at first Jewish and then Christian. And so at this time, very persecuted for more the Christianity than the Judaism at this point in time. Then we have Nubia, who was brought to Ostia, which is where the main book is set, where Flavia's family live. She was brought to Ostia as a slave girl, and Flavia bought her at the slave market and then set her free, and so she's one of the group. And then Lupus is a young beggar boy whose tongue had been cut out by an evil man, and so he obviously cannot speak, and he joins the gang and helps them solve mysteries. And it's just so wholesome, and also the historical accuracy is amazing. So Caroline Lawrence is like an actual historian as well as a children's book writer. So anything by her that is set in ancient Rome is absolutely fantastic. She does brilliant research. I do know a little bit about Roman history, and it's been fascinating to grow up and to be like taught new bits about Roman history, and I'm like, I knew that because of these 4. I've not mentioned what that one's specifically about because it's like book 14 or something, but essentially in each one there's a mystery and they solve it, and I love them so much. This was a 4-star. Related, kind of, is The Missing Thread by Daisy Dunn. This was gifted to me by the wonderful publisher W&N, so thank you so much, Rugs. And this is a non-fiction all around ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and the women who have been left out of the story here. There are a couple of women in this who are very strong, very powerful. They have been missed from the history books purely because they are female, and they were actually hugely influential in the way that many of the men were. However, there are also women in here who were very much more background characters. A very cool part of history when we look back and we want to see what influenced these men to make their decisions, and yet overlooked because they are female and because they had a lower status in these societies. So in both ancient Greece and ancient Rome, women had little to no status whatsoever. You were a possession, you belonged to a man. Very much in the way of, you know, your father gives you away when you get married. If you're female, your father is passing on his possession from himself to your husband. And that was very much the case here, really and truly. And yet some of these women had extensive power, and it's looking at how that happened, how some of them were punished for wielding the power that they had over certain men, how some of them got away with it, and surprisingly managed to have quite a lot of influence over the empires that they were in. That more happened for the Romans than it did for the Greeks. However, it was fascinating. It doesn't just tell you about these women. It tells you about them in the context of the history that's occurring. So I knew very little about ancient Greece. Like, just what's out in pop culture. That's what I knew. That's what I knew. And so I actually learnt a lot about history through this, like some of the mythologies that I've heard, you know, like Helen of Troy and stuff. I got a lot more in depth of like the historical knowledge that we have of this, and then including the women in this is essentially what this book is. It is a history of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. It just doesn't miss out the women. And this is fantastic. I loved it. Very, very readable. This is my first book from Daisy Dunn, and the writing was really readable. I had a fantastic time with it. I am very, very grateful that this was sent to me. They mentioned that they sent it to me because I had enjoyed The Earth Transformed by Peter Schmeichel so much. And I guess it is similar in the way that The Earth Transformed is all about how the Earth itself is changing because of human influence, but it also is just going methodically through history and showing you the bits, but also just telling you the history of each time as well. And this does the same thing with the history of ancient Rome and ancient Greece, just also including the women for once. So yes, this is absolutely fantastic if you like ancient Rome, ancient Greece and non-fictions. Like, genuinely, this was such a good book. This was one of my 5 stars of the month. Then, Across the Wall by Garth Nix. This is a short story collection. First short story is the longest. It's around 100 pages long, and that is actually set in the Abhorsen serial lyrial world, the Old Kingdom. The rest of the short stories are not. So, I find it quite interesting that they've put the cover on that matches the rest of the Old Kingdom. It's technically true, but also, be aware going in. I discovered that I love Garth Nix's writing. Like, I had a fantastic time with all of his other short stories. There was one that was technically problematic in here. He was asked to write a short story for, like, Australia. He was representing Australia, and so he went with Aboriginal tales, and was then informed by Aboriginal readers that this was offensive to them. They wanted to tell their own stories. And at the time he was like, I don't get it, but I'll go with it because that's what they want. And he's put an extra note in now, because these short stories have all been published before, he's put an extra note in now in this updated modern edition that he fully understands now, and that he's very sorry for what he had done at that point in time, FYI. But I really like the stories, like genuinely, I have a fantastic time with all of these little fantastical, a couple of sci-fi, mainly fantasy, all like a little bit dark, short stories. I had a wonderful time, and I had my first ever choose your own adventure in here. So like, it's one of the ones where, well, yeah, this one, if you do it properly, you have a dice. You have to pick what you have at the start. You have a list of equipment and you can pick a certain number of them, and then you roll a dice for some of them, and you see how that goes, and for other of them you just go where it tells you to. What happens. And I had so much fun with that. I've never done it before, I don't know why, and it was really enjoyable. So yeah, this was actually a surprise win. This ended up getting a 4-star. It was a really great read. Another 4-star, and that is The Witches of Vardø by Anya Bourbon. This is an Irish author who has Nordic heritage, if you couldn't tell by her name, and so she decided to write a fictionalised tale of events for what actually happened to some of the women who were living in Vardø. Vardø is a real place in the north of what is now Norway. That whole region has been changed constantly, and it is about some of the women who live there, some of the indigenous folks, the Sami, who live there, and also some people who were sent there in exile. And this really happened. There really were women who were put to the stake and burnt to death for being witches. Some of them escaped, mainly the younger girls, and so this book is essentially that story, but with some fictionalisation to make the narrative run easier. And I really appreciated this. I really liked the way that Anya represented the Sami. I don't have a load of knowledge on the Sami. They are people who are from like the north of Norway, Sweden, Finland and Russia. So there have been many issues for the Sami people being kind of segmented into these sections, but they were also stigmatised. They were like demons and they were evil because they didn't worship Christianity, and they've had a lot of issues, the same as indigenous people all across the globe. And so I quite enjoyed the way that the Sami were represented in here. I think that was done really well, but of course speak to someone who is Sami for an accurate thought on that. And yeah, it's another witch book, and I both love and hate them, because the way that women are treated hasn't changed at all. Of course, we don't get burnt at the stake. Small victories. Still not wanting women to have power. It is still trying to blame the sins of the mother on the daughter. It is still trying to pit women against each other, and it's never easy reading. The last witchy book I read was The Witchfinder's Sister by Beth Underdown, and that does the same thing where it draws on real life witch hunts. And so yeah, especially when you get to the end of the book, and of course they try and leave on a slightly happier note, but then at the end they have their author's notes stating, it has the list of the names of women in here who actually were killed. Anya states that 18 were burnt at the stake and 2 were tortured to death between October 1662 and April 1663. When I was working on the novel, I would often recite their names as a chant of remembrance. Maren Sigisvaldatter, Solvnilddatter, Ingeborg, Peder Krog's wife, who was tortured to death, Dorette Larsdatter, Ragnhild Klemensdatter, Maren Mogensdatter, Maren Henningsdatter, Marit Ramesdatter, Sigrid Oresdatter, Guri, Lurit's wife, Ellen Grunsdatter, Karen Andersdatter, Margaret Jonsdatter, Sigrid Jonsdatter, Gundel Olsdatter, Dorette Pulsdatter, who was tortured to death, Barbara Olsdatter, Bodil Klosdatter, Birgit Ulfsdatter, and Karen Ulsdatter. So that is the 20 women who, 18 of them were burnt at the stake, probably after being tortured. 2 of them didn't survive the torture. Some of these names were actually used throughout the novel, but as you heard there were quite a few Marens and Margrets and Marits, and some of the names were a bit too familiar for a story. And so she did change up some of the names, using names that were correct for the time as well, sometimes just swapping names around for the important individuals. But yes, this really is their tale, fictionalised, and 4-star read, because I struggle to give witch books any higher, just they're very taxing, but it is a very well written book, and if you're wanting to learn about the Witches of Vardø and you like to learn through fiction, I recommend. Then 2.5 stars! Loosely based on a made-up story by James Blunt. I didn't realise how accurate the title of this was going to be. So this is supposedly a memoir, but it also is not. He says at the start of it that it is made up, and that the way he words it, he's like, oh yeah, to my mum, 20 lawyers, 20 people who asked me not to repeat stories, like this is all made up. But then you read it and obviously, like that's not just him saying, oh it's made up guys, and then it's all true. Obviously there is stuff in here that's made up. And I cannot, for the fucking life of me, figure out what is made up and what is not. Because it's a fact that we know that he was friends with Carrie Fisher. He did live with her. And that immediately opens him up to so many more celebrities. So like, how am I meant to know? And then his military stories. My dad is ex-army. Same as Blunt. He actually served in the same area at one point. The amount of ridiculous stories that my dad has given me, I don't know how many of them are true, but they're just as ridiculous as these, so I don't know. And some of them just make him seem like a coked up arsehole. And like, I don't mean like, oh yeah, he's a drug-ridden dickhead. No, like, I would slap him, like, die in a ditch. Like, But then other of the stories are pretty chill, and then obviously you read his song lyrics, so like they've got to come from somewhere. Obviously, yes, they can all be fictionalised, but they have to come from somewhere, and his song lyrics are such a different vibe. And I don't know. And so I was like, okay, maybe it's me just being weird, being neurodivergent and not being able to kind of tell these cues. And maybe it's me being, you know, quite feminist and not enjoying some of his representation of women in here. I asked my dad, because I got this book from my dad. This was an unhaul from him. He doesn't keep any of his books, that doesn't say anything about his thoughts on it. But he wasn't keen on it either, and he loves Blunty. I was going into this because I really like memoirs, hoping I would have a great time with it. And I didn't. And that really doesn't help. Like 2.5 isn't awful, you know, out of 10, that's 5 out of 10, like, it's not bad. But I was just hoping to have like a great time with this memoir, and to hear some of his ridiculous stories, as well as just some of his life. But it was all just stupid stories that make him sound like a coked up posho dickhead. And maybe that's the image he wishes to cultivate, but I don't wish to read about it. So, this was sad. It is incredibly quick though, if you are curious still. Genuinely, the audiobook, which I listen at 2 to 3 times speed normally, is 6 hours and 1 minute long. And the writing in this hardback edition is the size of the moon. It is huge. So yeah, I could have read this physical book in an hour. It's a very, very, very quick read, so if you're still nosy, go for it. Then, second to last, I know, we're finally close to the end, fucking hell. Is it this one, or is it this one? I think it's this one. And that is Kim by Rudyard Kipling. So this is one of the classics, of course, that I read this month, and this ended up getting a 3.5 star rating. So this is set in India, during the period of British colonisation, and we follow a young white boy who was essentially abandoned by his father because his father passed away. Different kind of abandonment. And he was from one of the Irish parts of the British, at the time, army. And so this boy is a white boy living in the slums of India, and so he has obviously very much culturally inaugurated himself, and of course India's a warm country, so his skin is much more tanned. And so some people don't know that he is a white boy. However, he does have a necklace with documents in that state who his father was, that he was in the military, and if he ever ends up with the British military of any sort, he can present those papers and he will end up being cared for. He doesn't want this. He instead ends up finding a lama, a religious man, a holy man, and he ends up being his guide. Just like around India, helping him to beg for food, helping him to navigate certain cultural landscapes that he's not familiar with himself, because the lama is from Tibet. I think he said he was from Tibet. Why did I look at the back? It just tells me about Rudyard Kipling. This is an indie published version of the classic, and it's both good and bad. So there's no information on the spine, and there is no synopsis, okay? That's the bad bit. But then it does have the original, illustrations that were included in the book, which a lot of editions apparently don't have. So like, good and bad. And that is also this book. Of course I gave it a 3.5, so better than Bluntly, but of course this is written by a white man writing it about colonial India. There is some racism in here. Some of it is not necessarily felt by the author, and it's just the way he's depicting the characters, the British characters who've come over to India, but some of it is present, unfortunately. However, it's not as bad as it could have been. Like, really truly, it's nowhere near as bad as it could have been, especially for the time period. This is actually quite progressive for the time. Now, still backwards. But that was a relief to read, and I really did enjoy, like, seeing Kim grow up from this little boy into a young man. And I actually did enjoy this in the end, so I'm very glad I picked it up. And that was gifted to me by Caitlin as well, thank you. And then another one from one of my dad's unhauls. He came down and gave me a load of books. He just was like, oh yeah, I read these and I'm getting rid of them, as he does. Here you go. And I'm a bit of a book hoarder, but also I don't want my TBR to be huge, and I was like, what the fuck do I do now? Like, I don't want to get rid of them, I want to try them. So I read one. This is The House Next Door by James Patterson. It is 3 chilling stories, 3 short stories in one bind-up, with Susan Delalo, Max Delalo, apparently not related when I googled, and Brendan Dubois. My favourite was the one with Susan Delalo, then Brendan Dubois, and then Max. These are all kind of like home-based thrillers. I don't want to say too much about them. The first one, a new neighbour moves in and the housewife next door starts falling for him, even though she has husband, kids, but he is not what he seems and actually manages to get his little tentacles everywhere in her life. The second one, 6 girls have gone missing, and a detective gets a bit too close to the wife to try and find out what happened, because the husband has been suspected for the murders and has been arrested. That was unfortunately the most misogynistic and also the most predictable. Like, the third one was like a little bit misogynistic, but it wasn't predictable. It was like a really good story. But this was both predictable and misogynistic. Like, what am I doing with that? No. So that was the worst one for me, the killer's wife, with Max Delalo. And then the third one is The Witness. So there's a American family that goes to archaeological digs, etc. And they have discovered something that they shouldn't have and have been forced into hiding. And it's how they are almost kind of outed from their hiding, from their... is it hiding? Yeah. So, like a nosy neighbour who sees that they are very tanned individuals with a clearly armed man kind of wandering around, and who keeps calling the police on them because he's racist. And then also the people who are actually hunting for them, as well as the people who are wanting to protect them, as well as their family wanting to know about them because their family doesn't know where they are either, because they're fully in hiding with the US government. And so seeing that one develop was so interesting. Like, that was done so well, seeing how everyone kind of slotted into their places and how they that was good. And then yeah, the house next door was my favourite one, the titular story. So I gave this one a 3-star overall. The Killer's Wife really did bring it down, but I did enjoy it overall, and it was incredibly quick to read, like so quick. So I will hopefully get through this massive pile of James Patterson books that my dad has piled on me quicker than I think. And that's it. Finally, that's it. Oh! God. So that is all 26 books that I read in July. In June. I'm still in July. Yeah. Like, how am I supposed to do the thumbnail for this, lads? No, that's not gonna happen. So, I'm not sure what the thumbnail's gonna be, but that's the books. Yeah, I had a fantastic reading month, if you couldn't tell. I do wish that more of them had been books that I already owned, rather than it being 50-50, like literally 50-50, books that I owned and new books that came in / like borrowed from the library, etc. Because I really do need to be getting through my physical TBR. But I am trying to do that more and more. I am trying to focus really heavily on that now. When I got the reality check, when I counted up my books and realised that my TBR hadn't gone down at all. I've been reading loads, but not enough of what I already owned at the start of the year. So yeah, hopefully I will actually be able to get through that. If you've made it this far, I love you. Please go do something else. This has been a very long video. If you did make it this far, please put the book sack emoji down in the comments below, because I don't know, using my chin, what else can describe that half of books? And that's just, not fall. Do not fall. And then also this half of books. So yeah. Book sack emoji. If you'd like to see my plans for my July reading, that is up there. I do actually make my TBRs reasonable. So this time it's actually more than usual, 6 books. I will read more than that. And if you'd like to see how I do actually manage in July, then please do subscribe, because I will obviously put up my July wrap up at the end of the month. Thank you so much for watching, folks, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!